Crosscode is my favorite indie RPG game of all time, and I've always wanted to make something inspired by it. When 2.2 first came out, I tried making a puzzle level with huge inspirations from the game. But eventually, I lost motivation to keep building it, and even if I regained my motivation, the level's trigger work was a complete nightmare to work with. So fast forward for 2 years and suddenly, I had an epiphany while in the shower. Has anyone actually tried making a proper turn-based RPG before? And so, that is my goal with this project that I've started with this video. To make a Crosscode inspired turn-based RPG all in Geometry Dash. And if I end up abandoning this project like my last one, well, I guess I was able to make some videos out of it.
Let's go gambling!
To start with the project, I decided to test a theoretical loot system that was supposed to be akin to the one used in the Borderlands franchise. It was quite ambitious. The system featured different loot pools, rarities, and prefix modifiers. But I wanted to simplify it and make it more reasonable to be made in Geometry Dash. Ultimately, I decided that I wanted a loot system where every enemy group would have their own loot pool. When the player defeats the group, it would roll the loot system and randomly select a set item from the loot pool. I've decided to drop the randomized stats and modifier mechanics from Borderlands, as those would make this system a lot more complicated than it needs to be. Then, when the player gets an item from the loot pool, the item can no longer be obtained if the player encounters the same group of enemies afterwards. The item would not be able to drop throughout the player's playthrough without resetting the whole level or going back to a point before the player started the initial enemy encounter. I'm not that good of a creator, but I figured that it wouldn't be too hard to implement, especially now that I've simplified it by a lot. Before building the actual system, I started off by writing down a sort of visualization of how the system would theoretically work. This is especially helpful when it comes to making systems like this, but even with the most basic trigger work, visualization can help with predicting whether your idea is feasible. To start off, the loot randomizer will be triggered by a single mechanism. Then, it would activate the randomizer itself, which would select what loot pool to randomly choose and take loot from. Let's say it selects the common loot pool with 4 items inside of it. Now, it needs to randomly select an item to pick from that loot pool. Once the randomizer selects an item from the pool, it should then activate any triggers relevant to the item. And finally, the item should not be able to be obtained again, and if the randomizer tries to roll an already obtained item, it should restart the randomizer process. Sounds simple, right? It shouldn't be too bad to build. Well, let's see if we can turn this idea into an actually working system. Alright, following our visualization earlier, I've decided to have the system be activated with a spawn orb for the prototype version. As for the randomizer itself, let's have the spawn orb activate an advanced random trigger. I chose the advanced random trigger instead of the regular one because it lets you set more than 2 probabilities with different chance rates. This advanced random trigger will be the master trigger, that is the core of the system. Then, I wanted to pick a random loot pool to draw items from, so I'll have the master random trigger randomly spawn one of these 4 advanced random triggers that correspond to each rarity loot pool. Now, if we do this correctly, the randomizer should attempt to draw items from these loot pools while also respecting the chance rates I've set for each pool. Next, I want to start adding actual items to the loot pool. I will just be using random items for demonstration purposes. Then, we add the triggers that will activate when a specific item is drawn from a loot pool. In this case, I'll just add background pulses. And now, the randomizer should start randomly picking and activating the items.
3, 1, 2, 1, 3, 2, 3.
And there you go. That's the basic system all done and operational. Now, we have to add checks and conditions in order to not allow the randomizer to roll the same items twice. This part took me a while to figure out, but ultimately I just went with the simplest way I could think of executing this. First, set up 2 toggle triggers at the start of your level that will activate instantly. The first toggle trigger should toggle this part of the spawn and toggle triggers, while the others should toggle this one spawn trigger. Leave them unedited for now, as we will get to them later. Using a pickup trigger and count trigger, I can detect specifically what item was taken from the loot pool. I made a simple variable for each item. Now, if the randomizer rolls item number 1 in the common loot pool, it would update its variable and set it to 1 after picking the item from the pool. Then, a count trigger will detect the variable has been set to 1, and it will spawn and toggle on a pair of toggle and spawn triggers. These are the triggers that I toggled off earlier. The toggle trigger will disable the triggers that update the item's variable, along with triggers that are activated after the item has been picked. In this case, it's just the background pulse I added. Make sure to add a new group to those triggers and let the trigger toggle that group off. Meanwhile, the spawn trigger will spawn a toggle trigger which would toggle on the spawn trigger that I toggled off earlier. Make sure that the spawn trigger has the right groups and delay, because this spawn trigger will be the re-roller once the item has already been obtained. This should now fix the issues, but now, once all items from the pool are obtained, the randomizer will get stuck in a feedback loop, which might not matter to you, but we can fix this easily. Simply add another loot pool and that's it. You don't have to add anything to it. When the items are all gone, the randomizer has no choice but to roll the empty loot pool and stop itself. And there you have it. Now, the system is basically done. As you can see, if I go to this spawn orb and just click it a bunch of times, it will randomly pick these swords with various rarities. And I've also added some text here so you can see what exactly is happening. Well, that's it for this video about building a mechanic for my RPG project. This video wasn't really intended to be anything interesting or big. Quite frankly, I just wanted to try making a Geometry Dash video on my own. If you'd like to see more about the project or help me with the creation of the level, perhaps you know of a better method to make this system, you can join my Discord server and let me know. I also stream myself building all my projects on Twitch and sometimes YouTube too. With that being said, I hope you have a wonderful day and best of luck with your own GD projects.